Welcome to the Midnight Release presents Midnight Reflections with Chase. Today's episode is called When a Number Becomes a Story. Welcome back as we get into our third segment of Midnight Reflections. I started this a few weeks ago, and they are solo episodes that are very introspective, very reflective, and very personal in nature. Though I did allude to the fact that at some point in time, I might make these a little less introspective and just do general reviews or overviews of various games or movies that are important to me and talking through the plot lines of various complex stories and things of that nature. However, this is also not one of those episodes. This one is going to be a little different in the sense that it will still be introspective a bit, but also very strangely specific. I say that because the first two episodes, they were also very introspective and very personal, but I feel relatable at various levels, depending on if you have a specific year in your life that is very reflective in nature or could be considered a catalyst of sorts. Then, of course, with paternal passions, that episode, if you're a father or reflect on your relationship with your father. And this one is just very specific to me. And I haven't met a lot of people that have a scenario like this, but maybe you do. And maybe you've never thought about it, and now you're going to. But as I mentioned at the beginning, this episode is called When a Number Becomes a Story. And this has come up in our other episodes that Austin and I have done. But we're here to talk about the number 724. And with that being said, let's just go ahead and just jump right into what our topic is today. So, the reason that I went with the title, When a Number Becomes a Story, is because 724 as a sequence of numbers is something that has resonated with me for, I don't know exactly how long, but I believe it goes back to when I was 13 years old. And the reason that I think of that very specific age is because the very first time that I can remember seeing the sequence of numbers 724 was my cousin's phone number. Now, I had mentioned, I think in the Paternal Passions episode, that my cousin was a staple father figure for me, along with my grandfather and some other uncles. But his mobile phone number began with 724. And I'm not referring to the area code that I think is Arkansas, but the actual digits were 724. So the reason 724 is so important, just from a high level, before I get into the specifics about this number, is because starting at around that time, around when I was 13 years old, I have continued to see that series of numbers, 724, literally 3 to 5 times a day, every single day since I was 13 years old. And I see that sequence of numbers, whether it is I happen to look at the clock and it's 724. And I'm not talking about like I look at the clock at 720 and then subconsciously, oh, I'm going to look at it in 4 more minutes and it's going to be 724. No, it's not that type of scenario. It's I'm in the middle of doing this and getting coffee and going outside to smoke or whatever the case may be, and then I just happen to look and it's 724. I could be playing a game and, playing around a Destiny or playing GTA or something like that, and I just happen to notice that my wallet balance is, has 724 in it. Or after a strike on Destiny, the score has 724 in it. License plates. That's another super, super common one. I'll be driving, doing Spark in the morning or something of that nature, just driving around, and I will notice several cars that have a 724 in their license plate. And this number has just followed me inherently for so long. And, every time I've talked to people about it, no one else has like a number like this. And, I always go to the movie with Jim Carrey called The Number 23. Now, that's kind of a thriller horror movie to a degree because he is like super, super obsessed with it. And I don't even remember the specifics of the movie anymore. I just remember that he was obsessed with the number 23 and saw it everywhere. And he also like would see numbers and then do math that added up to 23 and all of that. This 724 situation, again, it's not like that. It's not like I force myself to see it with the clock. It's not like I see a sequence of numbers and then I do math and I'm like, ooh, 724 because it adds up to it. No, I truly see those exact sequences and it's in a lot of different places. And the reason that it started just kind of as a funny number situation is at first I would just point it out and people would laugh and we would just move on. But as I got older, it became very important in a lot of different ways. Probably the first and most important way that it became important was my sister was pregnant, about to deliver my niece, and we were all sitting out in the waiting room and all that jazz. And my aunt, who was back with my sister at the time, came up front to let us know, hey, everything is trucking along, and it looks like baby will be here anytime. So July 24th is going to be her birthday. Now, I didn't even make the connection to 724 at that exact moment in time. Instead, it was my mom smacking me in my chest. I dropped my phone. I'm like, what in the world? And mom says, July 24th. I was like, okay. She was like, 724. And I was just like, holy crap. So again, it had been that impactful because at that time I was, let's see, I'm 37 now. So I had to have been, I think, 19, I think. So it had been going on for that long. So lo and behold, my niece's birthday wound up being 724. And what was funny was that so I said I've seen it every single day, 3 to 5 times a day since I was 13. That may have been a bit of an exaggeration because I can also remember after very specific events, I would stop seeing 724. So after my niece was born, I very much remember a lull, if you will, in seeing the number 724. And that's interesting, of course. And look, I'm not into numerology or angel numbers or anything like that. And if you're listening to this and you are super into that and you want to tell me some specifics around 724, that's outstanding. And I would very much welcome it. But I find it just very interesting in a lot of different ways of how this number has continued to follow me. Because after that, again, I do remember there being a lull of seeing those numbers. But it wasn't long before I started seeing them again. And it was, again, the same kind of concept. Game scores, the clock, license plates, different various things. It could even be a scenario of watching the news and seeing the temperature at the bottom of the screen, and it's 72 degrees and it happens to be 4 p.m. So the way the numbers are right next to each other, it's 7, 2, and 4. That kind of scenario is another one that's super, super common. Now, there's some that are pretty creepy, actually. And this one is probably the most entertaining, if I had to say the of all of them, I would guess, because I've also had this happen, watching certain movies or TV shows or things like that. But one of my favorite movies of all time is Die Hard. Now, I used to say Die Hard was my favorite movie of all time, but it and Interstellar kind of battle it out for what the best one is sometimes. But Die Hard as a series, is my all-time favorite. And in Die Hard 3 with a Vengeance, so this is the one with Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, takes place in New York, and arguably maybe better than the first one, but the movie itself, and look, this movie's been out for so long, you can consider these spoilers, but you've had time to watch it. But for those who are familiar with the movie, in Die Hard 3, now what's funny is I'm going to tell you all this, and if you don't believe me, find the movie and do this, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But in that movie, when Bruce Willis is in the aqueduct tunnels and has to get out, he's driving the truck out, and all the water, the very poorly CG'd water behind him, is pushing forward, and he is driving through the tunnels, and he has to try and get out. All while Samuel L. Jackson is driving that Mercedes Benz to go to the Yankee Stadium, I believe. Anyway, Bruce Willis finds a grate, and the water manages to push him out. And Samuel L. Jackson pulls up. You see Bruce Willis's body flying in the air and all this jazz. And he lands in this big old puddle. He asks Samuel L. Jackson about Yankee Stadium, and he starts getting shot at. Well, he runs and gets in the Mercedes Benz, and they start driving, and they end up, getting chased by this Dodge Ram. And there's this kind of firefight going on. And at some point, they switch, I believe. No. They do switch. And now Bruce Willis is in the driver's seat. Well, when he tells Samuel L. Jackson to hold on, what ends up happening in the scene is he does a really great maneuver where he skids the car, turns it around where he's staring at the truck. He starts firing at him, and he continues spinning around until he hits the Dodge Ram and they're side to side. However, in that particular scene, right when he cuts the wheel really sharp, it cuts to the odometer for approximately a second, maybe less. And the mileage on the odometer is pretty well covered by the steering wheel. You can't see the full digits, but you can see 3 of them. And 3 of those digits are 724. Now, you may be laughing and being like, there's no way. How do you even notice that? But again, you could go and pull that movie up, go to that scene, pause it, and then just tap the frames. The thing is, I saw that movie back when I was a kid. I didn't notice that until I was probably 20, 21 years old. I was watching it, the scene flashed on the screen, I stopped, and I was like, there's no way. And I pivoted back frame by frame to get to that odometer, and sure enough, 724 was there. And it's nuts. I told that story to my buddy Brian, who's very in the loop on 724 as a number. And even he was just like, dude, there's no way. I was like, yeah. And I had a screenshot saved on my phone at some point in time. But that's probably as far as media goes, definitely the most interesting. Now, it's happened in other movies and things too. I feel like there's a movie on Netflix that recently came out, had Rebecca Ferguson in it, and the same kind of scenario happened where it just popped up very briefly. And Mom and I watched that, and I backed it up and showed her too. I think it was that one. I can't remember the name of it right now, but yeah. So that was another just kind of very weird and humorous type thing. And sometimes that's what happens. It's just a very quick kind of scenario. I did, prior to recording this episode, anyone with an iPhone knows that you can search your photos. And if I search for 724, now, of course, a lot of screenshots that include my gamer tag and stuff like that pop up. But I usually take screenshots or pictures anytime that number pops up. It's just something that I do. And what's funny is I have 13 pictures over the last 5 years of receipts from McDonald's, Arby's, Wendy's, other places where you're a number and they call out your number and they're 724. So even those scenarios is kind of where it's happened. That's been just absolutely hysterical as well. And again, these numbers happen. My niece was born. There was kind of a lull of not seeing it, and I very much remember that. Now, the other instance where the number stopped for a short time, I was in a situation living in Lexington, well, outside of Lexington and Winchester. And I had two full-time jobs. I was working at Office Depot during like traditional business hours. And then I was working overnight at Target where I would go in, and it was, I'd go in at like 11 p.m. or something like that. It was during back to school season. So I'd go in at like 11 p.m. and work until like 7 a.m. And then some days I would leave from there, go to Office Depot, work my 8 hours there, and then go home. Well, unfortunately, there was a time when I worked that long shift between both jobs. So I got off at like 4 or so in the afternoon, and I was absolutely just exhausted. And I got home and like I passed out, and I had to be back at Target like 11 p.m. So I got home at like 5 o'clock or something like that, and then I was going to sleep until like 10, so for like 5 hours. And then I had to go back to work at Target. But I didn't have Office Depot the next day. So I was going in at 11 and I was getting off at 7 and then driving home. Well, that day was July 24th. And I think everyone, I mean, at my age, 37, I feel like everyone has had some level of like a near death experience. Maybe not everybody. Maybe I shouldn't assume that, but I just feel that everyone has had something like that at some capacity. And this was one of those times that I had a near death experience. I was driving home from my job at Target, and I fell asleep at the wheel. Wound up running off the road into a field. And I mean, I woke up obviously once I hit the grass. I had to slam on my brakes and I slid. And it very much was like a scene from like a Final Destination movie or something like that, because where I stopped was probably, now it wasn't so dramatic to be inches or anything like that, but it was probably 10 or 20 feet from a backhoe, some kind of piece of equipment, where if I definitely would have kept going straight, I would have run into the bucket or whatever. And yeah, it was insane. And of course I, basically shit myself, for lack of a better phrase. And I just, got back on the road and continued my drive. And I think probably Brian was the only person I talked to about it at the time. But it was July 24th that happened. And I remember just being really freaked out by that. And I did not see 724 after that for any amount of time. Just like after my niece, there was a lull period. There was a lull period here. And what's interesting is the next several years after that. Now, again, just like with my niece, I didn't see it for a while, and then it came back. Same thing here. It came back again after a short time. But every year, for many, many years after that, I would not leave the house on 724. Because I was like convinced that something else bad was going to happen or something like that. So on July 24th, like I made it a point not to leave the house. Now I've gotten past that. I very much remember this year, I believe I went and walked the bridge on 724, which could be ominous in a way, but nonetheless, like I've gotten past that. Like I go out on July 24th now, but it's definitely something that is still consistent to this day. Like it is still, I mean, just today alone, I woke up this morning, I sparked, got my coffee, went outside to smoke, all of that. I look at the clock, it was 7:24. Of course, I chuckle as I see that. I saw two cars with 7:24 license plates today as well. And actually, the Destiny example I threw out earlier was because I played a strike earlier, and the score that we got was 10,724. So, it's still super, super fresh and common. Now, probably the most impressive, though, I would argue this is the most impressive, and definitely in recent memory. The Die Hard one's pretty impressive, but this one is probably why the title of this was When a Number Becomes a Story, is the personal aspect of this number. Yes, my niece's birthday. Yes, a near-death experience. But this one's the most unique. My grandfather, who I brought up in the 1998 episode, and I believe the Paternal Passions episode, used to be a clown. Now, if you all are scared of clowns, I am sorry to put that image in your head, but he used to be a clown, and he was like a hobo-style clown. And he was very kind of locally renowned, if you will. That's not me kind of trying to brag or anything like that. He just was. And I have the newspaper clippings to prove it. But there was a local artist. I say local. He could have been in Lebanon, Kentucky is where he lived. I don't actually know where the guy lived. But his name was Ernie Elwes. And there are a boatload of paintings throughout the whole family of Papaw in his clown makeup. Just a bunch of them. Like everybody in the family has some quantity of these paintings. And I have one and have had it for years. It followed me in my various apartments when I moved to Paducah, when I came back. And it is a kind of old, like Wall Street Journal page with the painting of his portrait over top of it. Now, this painting in particular isn't in a glass frame. So it's showing its age. There's no doubt about that. I've had that painting, again, for, a long time. Very long time, which is what makes this so intriguing. There was a time just recently, in the last 6 months or so, I was sitting and the lighting where I was sitting was coming in and hitting that picture in a kind of very specific kind of way. And I was sitting on the couch having a conversation with Mom, which I was looking that direction. The painting was behind her. And I noticed something on the painting. And I literally interrupted Mom and stopped her mid-conversation. And there was there's not really a way for me to describe it. Now, Mom has these pictures on her phone so that you all don't think I'm absolutely crazy. But because it's an old painting and it's not in glass and it's showing its age, there was a very distinct 7 imprint in the wear and tear, if you will, of this painting on the left side. And I say a very distinct 7 because the way, not necessarily that people write 7, but the way that you see it printed sometime, where the top horizontal part goes perfectly straight, and then on the right, it goes down straight just a tad, and then it pivots in like a curve, if you know what I mean. That is what I saw very, very distinctly. And then I had to, of course, I interrupted Mom, and I'm like, okay, am I crazy, or is this a 7? And from her, where she was sitting, she couldn't see it. And I said, okay, come sit where I'm sitting, because I'm fairly certain it's because of how the lighting is hitting it. And sure enough, she saw it. She was like, holy crap, that is. Like, I see what you mean. It's a very defined 7. And I chuckled. I'm like, I swear, if I find a 2 and a 4 in here somehow, I'm going to freak out. Now, at this point, I will say that, yes, I was very obviously, looking at this point. Well, lo and behold, beneath his portrait, so still on the Wall Street Journal thing, but beneath the actual face, turned 90 degrees to the left, I see, and again, it was a very distinct, the way the number 2 is written or typed, where it has the top curly Q and it comes down and then it stops, and then one small vertical line and then horizontal. Very much like that key digit. And it was sideways, but it was very obvious. And I was like, okay, all right, this is weird. This is the first time where I was kind of okay. And then, lo and behold, over on the right side, Mom called it out at first, and I didn't really see it, so I wasn't going to count it if I couldn't see it. But then, like, it was actually like a little bit later, like when the lighting had changed, then sure enough, another perfect digit. And like I said, she took the pictures because she was like, no one's going to believe us. She took the pictures, zoomed in, circled it. I've sent it now to my buddy Brian. I sent it to my sister. And it was insane to see that. And the time, of course, in life for that to show up was also very interesting for various reasons. And, it was another instance. I didn't see 724 for a little bit after that. So, it was just very interesting. Um, the last thing that I'll say about 724 that just proves how much this still continues to follow me, and this is the first time where I had to do like 23 style, and it was kind of a stretch, but it was funny, is when your address, now it's not 724. If you're chuckling, it's like, how do you pick an address at 724? No, but the digits of the address very just easily. It's not a stretch to do the math to make it add up to 724, which is so funny. Like the two digits are 24, and then there's some math that adds up the numbers. So, but anyway, if we reflect on this a little bit, like I said, it's very specific to me. I don't know of anyone else that has ever had a sequence of numbers that have followed them like this one has me. I have gotten curious and Googled or gone to ChatGPT or different things, and I never really get any kind of definitive explanation around this and why this sequence of numbers has followed me for so long, and essentially kind of had some very staple, identifiable moments of my life story being related to that sequence of numbers. But if you do, I'd love to hear about it because no one I know has a sequence of numbers. So if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I've got one of those too, and if you have really cool personal stories that tie into it, that would be cool to hear too. But it is something that, if you take it at face value, and especially the most recent kind of iteration with my grandfather, my papaw's painting, seeing that at the particular time that I had seen it was very interesting, and did a little bit of internal reflection about that, if you will. But, it's just something that I still wonder what the significance is. There is a huge part of me because 724 is coming up here soon, by the way. Do I go out and drive on that day? Do I not? I haven't ever thought about that in recent memory. I told you about when I ran off the road and then I didn't drive on 724 for probably 5 or 6 years after that. But it hasn't been at the forefront for the last several. But now it's kind of coming back. Like, maybe I shouldn't leave the house on 724. Even though I'm relatively certain I'm not going to have that option this year. But I probably will not leave the house on that day. So, anyway, any of these episodes that you hang out and listen through, I always appreciate it. And especially these ones here that are myself talking to myself, essentially. I mean, I'm not talking to myself, I'm talking to you. But I always appreciate you listening and following up with the pod and keeping track of us and all of that. It really means a lot. And this is still kind of a therapeutic journey. And it's going to continue to be one. We have fun with it, but these reflection episodes allow me to really use it for kind of what it was intended for. So again, thank you for hanging out with us. And remember that, yeah, some memories are worth lining up for, but others, sometimes you just got to sit down and reflect on.